I have spent my entire life, as you have, fighting for the good in this world. And for you to accuse a good person of not caring about human life, shame on you.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. It's becoming increasingly obvious to everybody now that the Liberal Party is really starting to crack. We bring you 2 examples in just the past 2 days that illustrates this is nothing but bad news on the horizon for Justin Trudeau.
Let's take a look.
There are no legislative safeguards.
Well, you can say that.
Well,
you
haven't cited
theater.
one. You haven't
continue
cited
the play.
any.
Yes.
You haven't cited any, and you haven't responded to the fact that 78% of Ontario psychiatrists believe that whatever so-called safeguards that will be in place are completely insufficient. We're talking about wrongful deaths when there's an inappropriate application of MAID. That's what we're talking about.
So we're talking here in this legislation
is what you've demonstrated is that
we're taking
ideological.
First of all, I'm just going to say I reject.
You're playing with people's lives.
I reject that totally. I reject
it's absolutely disgraceful.
No, what is disgraceful is mischaracterizing my position or mischaracterizing the position of any member of Parliament, sir. Saying that any member of Parliament doesn't care about any human life is a disgraceful thing that I will not tolerate.
Well,
and for you to step into this committee and make an accusation of any member of Parliament that they do not care about the life of another human being is absolutely beyond reproach, sir. I have spent my entire life, as you have, fighting for the good in this world. And for you to accuse a good person of not caring about human life, shame on you. Shame on you.
Wow, Holland is broken. He's not just cracked, he is broken.
Shattered, probably.
Yeah, that's a great word, shattered.
And this is the problem. You know, I've read some comments about Holland, and some people actually think that he's one of the more articulate Liberal MPs and ministers, which I would agree.
He was House Leader, was he not?
He was House Leader.
Yeah.
He seems to know how to speak. The problem is when you have these possibly good Liberal MPs and they have no choice but to follow the far left ideology, and this is where it leads them.
Well, because if you remember, the Liberal Party is supposed to be kind of left center. They're not supposed to be as extreme left as Trudeau has taken them. Now, this clip was from the Standing Committee on Health, and they're studying the MAID program. Several years ago, the Supreme Court had come back with the amendment that MAID needed to be offered to people whose sole diagnosis was a mental illness. They couldn't say, oh, well, you're mentally ill, therefore you're not allowed to have MAID. It was deemed unconstitutional. So Michael Cooper of the Conservatives obviously is pushing against that. The time is up. They're supposed to be implementing MAID for people whose sole illness is a mental illness, not a physical one, and whose death is not foreseeable in the near future. That was another one of the initial safeguards, if you will, that's been kind of removed. So Cooper on the Conservative side is trying to argue that if you remove these safeguards, then people may die unnecessarily and for no reason. And you can't just take them away. There needs to be something in place to prevent people from using MAID when there are alternatives available to them that maybe can help them get better instead.
Well, the other more malicious thing that could happen is you might have acquaintances, relatives, people that know these people that are suffering from mental illness, and it would be unfortunately very easy to push them into it. So without these safeguards to ensure that, yes, all of the check boxes are checked and this person does actually, from the bottom of their being want to go through with this, without those safeguards, how do you ensure that you are not, as Cooper says, committing wrongful death? This is the problem. And he's citing that the Canadian Psychology Association is saying 78% of those safeguards are crap. They are insufficient. And this is the problem. Now you have Mark Holland over there who has to toe the line. And the thing is I think he broke.
Yeah, he definitely broke. I mean, I think from what I just observed, anyways, it's not like I have inside knowledge, but from what I just observed, it seems like Holland has to toe this party line, which may not be in line with his personal beliefs, but he still has to support it. And then there's like this disconnect from what he actually believes. And that's where you get like this freak out.
Yeah, there's a schism in his, I think Fox is right. I think he is just reacting to it, and his moral compass just exploded there. And I think you saw that he probably actually doesn't believe in what is going on here, and he's taking it as a personal attack when Cooper isn't meaning it as a personal attack. He's meaning it as a political argument, an attack on an MP, on the health minister. That's what that's directed at. But the fact that Holland took it personally means he's not happy with this. He is struggling internally with this, and this is the problem. And this is where the Liberals are starting to crack. This is where they're not able to continue towing this far left radical party line ideology. And
from what we have heard from Liberal insiders, they're not happy with the party.
And that leads us to our next example.
So we've heard some critical comments made by the parliamentary secretary to the Foreign Affairs Minister regarding your government's policies and statements on the Gaza war. Your reaction to those comments, please, and can he stay on as a parliamentary secretary?
Well, one of the things that I've talked about an awful lot over the past number of months is how difficult it's been for millions of Canadians in having very, very challenging conversations with neighbors, with friends. There are people from different perspectives and different places that are hurting deeply.
So who's this mystery person? Well, it's none other than Liberal MP Rob Oliphant, who it seems was secretly recorded by a constituent who had a phone call with him. This is what Oliphant said.
I will defend UNRWA forever. Their work in Lebanon, their work in Jordan. I've been there. I've been to the refugee camps. I've examined the curriculum that people have gone crazy about, saying it's anti-Semitic. I don't believe it is. I think UNRWA is maligned every day. I do believe I understand there were allegations of 12 or 13, I've heard different numbers, UNRWA employees who were involved in the massacre on the 7th of October. That's horrendous. They should not be. However, you don't stop aid to Palestinians in Gaza because of 12 or 13 employees out of 13,000. It drives me crazy. It is opportunistic, it is unfair, and it is maligning the operation of a UN organization that is doing not perfect work. There's no organization that's made of human beings that's perfect. UNRWA has its faults, but it is the best we have for education, for medical care, for food, all of those things. I would have done it completely differently. I would have immediately said exactly the same money will flow to humanitarian assistance. We'll just find other ways to do it temporarily. Our government bungled that, and we should have announced it the same day.
So whether you agree with what's going on with Israel in terms of, the actions that they're taking over in the Middle East, whether you agree with, what people are saying about Palestine, it doesn't really matter in terms of what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is somebody that has become frustrated enough to actually say this to a constituent, and he said more than that. He's and we'll get to a CBC article that talks about this. It says, quote, "I've come many times thinking, do I quit my job? Do I just go back to being an MP?" That's something, to just completely quit being the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, which is, Miss Jolie, just so you know.
Well, they get a little bit of a pay raise as a secretary, do they not?
They do. So, so the fact that he's saying, I quit, the fact that he's saying the government is out to lunch, they made the wrong decision, he's literally speaking against Jolie and Trudeau and the rest of them.
Well, and the other thing, I mean, becoming a parliamentary secretary is kind of like on your way to becoming a minister. So it's another step in your political career path if you want to, one day be a minister.
Well, and here's the thing. Again, all MPs watch the polls. Pretty sure Rob Oliphant sees that, he's not going to have a chance to be a minister for a very long time because it's not like they're going to be re-elected anytime soon unless the Conservatives do something completely crazy.
Well, I know if you look at Oliphant's riding of Don Valley West, the Conservatives are leading by 7%.
And that's a GTA riding, everybody. So
it's a Toronto riding that's usually Liberal, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So you're having more and more Liberals privately and publicly. So Rob was privately saying this to a constituent, but he it was all thrown into a CBC News story. Surprising that CBC News actually posted this, but this is what you're starting to see across the Liberal Party. People are they're shattering because they cannot reconcile their ideology with their personal beliefs. And many of them don't buy into the far left stuff, but they have to support it because that's what Trudeau and that's what Freeland and that's what the rest of them want the Liberals to do.
I will say, though, that I feel a little bit bad for Oliphant that this was recorded in secret and then leaked to the media. I think that's kind of inappropriate. When Cypher and I talk to any member of Parliament or anyone in a political role as ourselves, like as our human selves, we don't record it, obviously, and we don't bring any information outside of that meeting because it's very different being media versus being just a Canadian citizen and talking to someone who's involved in politics as a citizen versus talking to them as media. So we try very, very hard not to blur that line.
Well, and this is why you never hear any of the conversations that we have with MPs on the show, because we want to make sure that we respect, their boundaries, and we also make sure that they know this is off the record, or, if it's going to be on the record, then we tell them so. So, but this is becoming a big problem for Justin Trudeau, and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair ended up weighing in on what he thinks about the future of the Liberal Party. Let's take a look.
So Trudeau is 20 points behind Poilievre. Can he make up that ground? What does he need to do?
He needs to get a little bit of luck because everything has been going against them. Every time they do something that's working, they had a really successful cabinet retreat in Montreal by any fair accounting. It went well. They had some messages. They were going to deal with certain issues, including car theft. It was something that was top of mind for many Canadians. The last day of that event, Mr. Trudeau was getting ready for a victory round with the media that had been in place during the whole event. He gets nailed with a decision by the federal court saying that his invocation of the Emergencies Act to deal with the so-called Freedom Convoy was illegal. And that's something you can't control. You can't know that the judge has decided that it's that afternoon that it's coming out, but it's typical of what Trudeau's been going through. It wasn't enough that he had a devastating report, because they would have known about it a bit in advance. They had time to prepare. There was a devastating report on Monday from Auditor General Karen Hogan, and saying, she's never seen such mismanagement ever, all the rules being broken, contracts being given it without tender, and so forth. That was just on the ArriveCan app. What we found out yesterday, and what became the only topic of conversation between Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Trudeau at the beginning of the question period was, hold on, it's not just the $59.5 million and counting, because as Hogan says, she has no way of knowing what the real numbers are. That's how bad the management was. They're also pointing to the fact that this company of 4 people in the basement of a bungalow in Ottawa has received, since starting 3 weeks after Mr. Trudeau came to power, $250 million, $250 million in contracts. How's that even possible? So now, of course, there's going to be a police investigation. Mr. Trudeau's using that as his pretext not to answer. But when you know there's a police investigation and your best defense is to say, let's wait for the police, things aren't really going well, are they, Marcia?
Even Jagmeet Singh, as you point out, is pulling back his support of the Prime Minister. What does that say to you? What does that mean for the NDP and for potentially Liberal fortunes moving forward?
As the Liberals have gone through this slide, it would have been possible to think, well, maybe the NDP is going to pick up a few points from those losses from the Liberals, because they are, in the case of the Liberals, they're slightly center-left on some issues. The NDP resolutely progressive and left-wing on most of them, but there would have been some possibility that some of those votes would go towards the NDP. It hasn't been the case. You know, they're stagnant in the polls. He's doing well, by the way, for an inter-election period. Singh's numbers are not bad, but he's not been able to boost up despite all the travails of Trudeau's Liberals. And I think that he's very wise to say, look, I'm going to pull back from this deal, because how can he go to voters in the next election and say, oh, don't vote for the Liberals, they're really bad. And people will just say, but you've been backing them. You've been holding them up, propping them up for years. Why are they bad all of a sudden? So I think that Singh had to pull back, say that they're not respecting their deal on pharmacare, and hope that the public believes his version and not the version that Mark Holland and Justin Trudeau are going to be putting out.
Boom.
And that's what we've been saying, folks. That's exactly what we've been saying, is you have to have distance between what your party's message is and supporting the minority government that's in power. And that goes for the Bloc as well. The Bloc isn't going to go anywhere near Trudeau with all of this crap coming out. And it's coming out by the day. You probably heard that, you know, now there's going to be a class action lawsuit now. Like, it's just, it keeps on coming.
What's that lawsuit for, Cypher?
It's about the Emergencies Act that was just ruled as unconstitutional by Judge Mosley. So, not surprising, after that ruling came down, there's going to be a bunch of lawsuits against the federal government for all of the stuff that happened. So this is what's coming down. It is just, it's hit after hit after hit for Trudeau. And this is, I think, the reason why these Liberals are just, they've had it. They've all had it. And one by one, they're just going to be popping off like this. And it just makes it that much worse for Trudeau's government. So the dominoes have started to fall, everybody. The only question is how long does it take until the last domino falls, which is Mr. Justin Trudeau himself?